Hello, my name is Hashem. I'm a graduate student in the physiology program here at State, and I did my project on oculocutaneous albinism. I chose this topic because I found the genes behind the variation in skin color to be interesting. And in terms of albinism, it's a disorder of lack of melanin, I should say. So I broke my website down into a few sections: signs and symptoms, affected tissues, gene pathway, treatment research, references, and the introduction page. I made the introduction page in a way that if you were to only view my introduction page, you would gather enough information to have at least an introductory understanding of what albinism is, who it affects, the types, and then a brief discussion of causes, as well as the heritability pattern. I chose the diagrams and pictures as I did because of their simplicity, but also their appeal. I like this image with the eyes, the transluminescent irises. It's a little creepy, I guess, but I think it draws people in and it shows very clearly the kind of phenotype you see with at least ACA1 albinism. I also liked making this table. I think this is a very concise way for anyone who's visiting my site to be able to gather the different types of albinism. Yeah. And I chose not to talk about one type, but four, just because they're a little bit different, even if phenotypically you may not be able to see the differences. Genotypically, however, the causes are different. Moving on to signs and symptoms, I spoke briefly about how it's diagnosed. It's diagnosed visually. If you see someone with very white skin, maybe the bleached, almost bleached like eyebrows, transluminescent irises, and an inability to tan with things like nystagmus, then it's an easy way to diagnose it. However, to diagnose a specific type, molecular analysis would be needed. And in a brief discussion of signs and symptoms, I like to be thorough, so I didn't focus again on one specific sign or symptom. I focused on the multiple signs and symptoms that you would see. Then for affected tissue again, I chose to talk about multiple tissues as it affects multiple tissues versus speaking about one. And I like to start off by talking about the normal development, just because it gives a person an idea of how these tissues develop normally before I go on and discuss disordered development, so they understand the difference between normal and an albino development. And then the meat of it, the gene pathways and signaling. There's a lot in this. It's probably my favorite section to work on, I think, because I really, really love genes. In specific, I have an interest in this gene, SLC45A2, because I find it fascinating in that it's associated with, I want to say 30 to 40% of the skin color variation we see in lighter skin populations in Europe, Middle East, South Asia versus African populations. And all it does is essentially, at least the version that most non-African people have, all it does is essentially make the tyrosinase a little less active, but also the pH within the melanosomes a little bit different. I want to say makes it a little bit more acidic, which leads to more production of pheomelanin versus eumelanin, so less brown melanin and more yellow and red melanin. And I guess I found that interesting because of the centuries of history and identities that people have based on just something like skin color, when in reality it's very simply comes down to a difference of one gene and I guess activity of an enzyme, which I found interesting. But in albinos, they have a mutated copy of this gene, so it's ineffective entirely with no melanin production. And again, same as the last page, I spoke about normal development, I spoke a little bit about mutations, and then the signaling pathways. I chose this image right here as if someone wanted to skip reading all this information. I think this image sums it up. It's a very complex process, so it's very hard to summarize, and I tend to like to be thorough with things. Now for treatment, albinism can't really be treated necessarily, only, at least certain things like with vision may be able to, but with the skin and the hair not necessarily. But there's a new treatment using gene therapy that I spoke about in this section as well as my research section. And I chose the macaws as my animal model because they're primates, and I found that interesting. And then references, I had a lot of references just because I was speaking about all four types of albinism, and there's a lot associated with them. I would say if I had more time, I might have talked about syndromic versions of albinism and perhaps various other mutations that cause albinism. But that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're able to get enough information to have a good understanding of albinism. Thank you.